honest conversations on the Mad to Be.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. I am Nama Inzaduru, and this is Health Corner, a Q&A session with health and wellness experts to give you insights, resources, information, and education that is relevant to you and affects your daily life. Today, I have the authoress, the perfume connoisseur, the it girl, Ekemini Ogunshola. Welcome, Ekemini.
Thanks, girl. Wow, that intro was superb.
Thanks, now. Thank you. Thank you. You have to practice now. I had to be reputable to the person here. Thank you so much for coming. Today, Kemini and I are going to be talking about all things emotional wellness as it integrates to health, why they're important, why considering emotional wellness is important when it comes to our health, and how the two mix and how the two are different. So let's get right into it. Can you introduce yourself and share what inspired you to become an emotional wellness and faith-based coach?
Well, hi. First, I'd like to say thank you so much for inviting me on your platform. That really means a lot to me. My name is Ekemini Ogunshala. Most people call me EK. I am the host and founder of the Yellow Podcast. I'm also the author of Emotions in His Image, which is an emotional intelligence plus faith book. So that's pretty much me in a nutshell. I mean, I have my educational background in strategic communications. And so, I just have a passion for communication with influence and persuasion and with just emotional education. So, what inspired me to go down this path of emotional wellness, I guess, and just emotional intelligence coaching is, my journey with emotions pretty much started like when I was like 16 years old, and I didn't have the best self-control when it came to my emotional like impulses. I didn't know how to manage and steward my relationships and emotions because I'm someone who is deeply sensitive. I tend to feel things deeply. And so I would say it was a conversation with my father, which I talk about in my book. A conversation with my father that kind of just sparked up my just me being intrigued and curious about just emotions. And so I started emotional intelligence coaching from 16. And then eventually I realized that, like, wow, this is all well and good, but it still feels like there's a void. I'm also, I'm a Christian. And so it still felt like I was trying to like compartmentalize my emotional growth and separate it from my spiritual growth. And so what really made me want to go down this path of coaching myself and emotional wellness is helping other people to find a way to bridge that gap between their emotional growth or emotional wellness growth and their spiritual growth, because I personally just believe that you kind of need both of them to really just grow and accelerate when it comes to your emotional wellness.
How would you define emotional wellness from a faith-based perspective?
I feel like to define emotional wellness, I have to start with what it is not. I think a lot of people, when they think of emotional wellness, they think positive emotions. So a lot of people feel like emotional wellness means, yeah, my emotions are great and dandy, and I feel more of the positive ones, and I don't feel the negative ones as much because I'm growing. But that's really not what emotional wellness is, because first of all, there really isn't positive and negative emotions. It's not that black and white. I think it's very important for us to understand that like emotional wellness is not about feeling more of the positive emotions and less of the negative ones, because emotions are not that black and white. But emotional wellness is more about being anchored. Like I really just want to emphasize that. It's more about your inner self being centered and being anchored, and it's more about like you being emotionally strategic and kind of having certain things set in place to manage emotions when they come. So it's not about feeling more of certain types of emotions and less of the others, but more of like, do I have a grounding and like a center and a plan for the different emotions that are going to flow through me and go through me in life and with my different relationships? Do I have some way to process and to get those emotions out in a healthy way as opposed to an unhealthy way, regardless of both the good and the bad? Because to be honest, you can have a lot of good emotions good per se, and still have a really bad impulsive way of expressing your good emotions. So it's not even about that. It's more so just about being in alignment with your values, with your principles. And so my definition, if I were to give a generic definition, it would be more so being in alignment with your moral principles and your values when it comes to your emotional expression. But if I were to give a faith-based definition, it would be to be in alignment with God and with, God's will for yourself when it comes to your emotions.
I like that definition. So I'm actually flipping through your book and I'm trying to find the chapter that actually really made me inspired me to bring out this interview or to interview you about the connection between physical health and emotional wellness. You talked about anxiety, you talked about trauma, stored emotions, and how they're linked to certain physical manifestations of the physical. I wanted to get into, obviously we're not doctors, so we cannot prescribe any treatments, just hashtag here.
Mhm.
But I did want to talk about wellness habits and things that people can put into practice to help them process their emotions better, to kind of attain a certain level of emotional wellness. I believe those are things that we can talk about. So, what are three emotional wellness habits that you'd recommend people start practicing today?
That is a really good question. Because I think it's also very important. Like a lot of people actually don't know, like how to some wellness habits that they can, incorporate in their daily lives. And so I would say like I don't even want to talk about the really big things because they're really little things that we can literally do that are so easy to do just on a day by day. One of them, I talk about it in my book. It's an exercise called Name It to Frame It. So, hashtag Name It to Frame It. Y'all check it out. Emotions in his image. Shameless plug.
Please
But
don't
yeah,
share
so
the Bible book.
yes. So the first thing I would say is it's an exercise in chapter 2 of my book, I believe, Name It to Frame It, which is really about emotional awareness. And so I started doing this when I was 16 years old. I set 3 alarms on my phone, like which you don't have to do 3 alarms. For those listening, you can start with just one alarm a day. So I set 3 alarms on my phone every day, and every time those alarms went off, it would be like a prompting for me to just stop and still myself and figure out what it is I'm feeling in that particular moment. So I think the reason why this exercise is so important is because um, it's easier to just stop and think about what you're feeling in a moment than for you to have to think about your emotions in a really drastic situation. Because if it's like a really emotionally charged conflict and whatnot, if you don't already have that foundational understanding of just processing simple feelings, then you're not going to say, okay, I'm really pissed, let me just process and calm myself. No. So this exercise is one of the like the first step that I would say like a good habit to kind of start to practice is just set a time every day where you just pause and you say, what am I feeling? And it's going to really push you to be able to label emotions that you're not even used to like using. For example, like I was like in my 20s when I found out that boredom is also an emotional form, okay? Yeah, like I was I was literally in my 20s when I found that out cuz I remember there would just be certain times where I'm restless, I'm feeling stuff but I don't know what I'm feeling, but I'm just like feeling very uneasy and I'm really like restless and I'm just like and it's like in like processing that in my head I know okay, Kemi, you're not depressed, what is this? And then eventually, from just sitting still and processing that, I realized I feel like really bored. Like that's really what it is. Like not just bored like in that particular moment. It was like a boredom that had settled for like a while. Just kind of bored with that particular season, right? And so it's very important to be able to like sit still and just say, what am I really feeling? Am I feeling indifferent? Because that is another one. Like maybe you're feeling indifferent and now your friends are talking to you and showing you, oh, do you like this one or that one? And you're just like, I don't really, and you're not even realizing it's coming from an emotional state of being. So that's the first one I would say is name it to frame it. The second wellness habit I would suggest is, now that you have learned to name it to frame it, now learn to express it in a contained space. So, a very good practice to express emotions in a contained environment is journaling. I know people say that a lot, and no one really likes to do it, or some people don't. But journaling is actually one of the best ways that you can process your feelings in a safe and contained environment. You've probably like seen certain movies or all those shows where people are feeling certain deep feelings and they're like, oh, just write it down and tear up the paper or whatever. It really does help. It sounds crazy, but it really helps. So naming your emotion and then being able to journal like what it is that you're feeling, how that feeling makes you, just what that feeling is making you think of, what that feeling is making you want to do. Another thing that I started doing for myself, because, like I've kind of been writing a lot more, is treating, instead of just writing about my day and how I felt, but writing about the emotion almost creatively like you were a person. So that's something else that I've just started to do, where I just describe the emotion creatively, because nobody can take that away from me. I can express how I feel in my journal.
Okay.
And then the third thing, emotional wellness habit. Okay, so those are two things. The third thing that I would suggest is finding, like, being able to identify the things that make you feel better.
Mhm.
Like, it sounds so basic, but like, it's so important. That's the emotional regulation part. A lot of people don't actually know how to diffuse like their emotions. Like, a lot of people don't actually know what to do when they kind of just like express it and then just leave it there.
Mhm.
So being able to figure out, is it painting? Is it running? Is it going to the gym? Is it talking with a friend on the phone? Is it praying? Is it, like whatever it is, but being able to regulate your emotions for yourself. There's a huge tendency for people to rely on other people to regulate their own emotions for
Mm.
themselves. We do it a lot. We don't realize it. I do it in my marriage, where it's like you feel some type of way and you're expecting your partner to figure it out for you and then to regulate it for you. That's not healthy. So you have to figure out a way to regulate your emotions that doesn't have to rely on other people, or you dumping anything on other people, because that will in turn help you to be able to tell someone, hey, this is how I'm feeling. So this is how I am feeling. So this is what I need in this moment, rather than expecting the person to figure that out for you, because it just leads to unhealthy relationships and a poor mental health. So yeah, those are the three things. One, name it to frame it. Two, find a safe space, whether it's journaling or whatever it is. And then three, find a way to regulate those emotions for yourself.
Thank you so much. Mentally, I've written them down. The journaling one I think is a great tip. That's one that I do. The writing things down and then tearing it up. I know I can remember moments earlier this year where I was feeling really like anxious or very overwhelmed. I would literally write down everything that I was thinking and tear it up and throw it in the trash. And it helped so much. So that's definitely, those tips were amazing. Because a lot of your writing and your life is inspired by Christ. Faith is a big part of your journey. It has been a big part of it's a big part of your book. I wanted to talk about some practices that are often associated with the faith: prayer, meditation, fasting. How can those support emotional regulation and mental clarity?
That's a really good question. I have to give it to you. That's a really good question.
Thank you, girl. I have to get ready. I had to get ready now.
Yeah. So you said prayer, uh, fasting, and
Meditation.
meditation. Yes. So here's the thing, like emotional wellness, like I said in the beginning, from a faith-based perspective, it's really also about making sure that your emotions are in alignment with God's will, God's principles, God's values, not just your own. And so let's break it down let's start with prayer, right? Prayer is such a great tool for emotional wellness. And here's the thing, like, I love God. I love God because I don't think we realize how much He took into consideration how we are wired in the instructions that He gave us for how to live life. Like, He literally took into consideration our emotional needs, our physical needs, all of that. So even when He tells us to rest, it's for our good. Like, it's not just because, oh, I'm God and I told you so. No, like he literally took all those things into consideration. So starting with prayer, um, I've always like I always advise people, or at least the Christians in my life, like before you call somebody else to vent about your feelings, before you do that thing you want to do, block that person, or whatever it is, like, have you spoken to God about it? Have you just gone to his presence and just prayed about it? Because prayer it's a spiritual exchange. Like, you are exchanging the burdens on your heart for the peace that is in his heart. It's not just you coming to just blah 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 blah. No, like, there's something about being in the presence of God and just praying that it almost puts things in perspective, right? It's kind of like I don't know if anyone has ever felt this feeling before, where you're feeling some intense feelings, and then, or you're thinking some very crazy thoughts, and then you open up your mouth and you talk about it, and it makes the thoughts feel smaller. Like, I don't,
Yeah.
like, it makes the emotion feel smaller. Yeah, like, that's the power of getting what is in here out. And so prayer is a great way to do that with the one who can handle all of that. And so when we get into God's presence and we pray, we're not just laying things down, but it's an opportunity to exchange the unforgiveness or the offense or the resentment or any of that for his peace, for his love, for his grace, his forgiveness. And then for meditation from a faith-based perspective, it's not just about emptying yourself out, but it's about filling yourself up. Because there's scripture that tells us that an empty house is dangerous, okay? Because you will be filled up by something, like,
Yeah.
regardless of. And so meditating is really about meditating on his word. So being in his presence and emptying all the negative thoughts out, emptying everything, just quieting your soul in his presence, and
Mhm.
then filling yourself up with what he has to say about you, what he has to say about your beauty, what he has to say about glory, what he has to say about friendships, about relationships. And so meditation on God's word actually really, really helps to change your thought patterns. Like, I want y'all to hear that. It's the same thing as when any other emotional wellness coach tells you to write positive affirmations. It's the same thing. When you meditate on God's word, you're filling up those empty spaces, those voids, and those negative thoughts with what he has to say. And, I don't know who said this, but you create a habit by doing something consistently for at least like 21 days.
What is, yeah.
Right. That's why we always see 21-day fast. We always see 21-day this, 21-day that. And so imagine if you're able to meditate on God's word for just that consistent period of time. How different would you think about your relationships, about anger, about what it means to not let the sun go down on your anger, about what it means to lay your anxious thoughts before him and to thank him for what he's given you? And then the third thing, fasting, which is probably the most difficult one for a lot of people, at least for me. you know, yeah, I can read my Bible all day. I can, pray all day, but fasting, ooh, like, so the reason why fasting is so hard and so important is because fasting, it basically reorganizes the layers of dominance in your life. So fasting helps to put your spirit in dominance over your flesh. That's what fasting does. And so fasting actually is an important tool when it comes to like dealing with your impulses. So you can imagine how it also plays a part in your emotional impulses. It's not just about your physical impulses like food and sex and all those different things. Like, no, like, your emotional impulses are also very, very important. When you lack self control in your life, it shows in how you navigate your emotions. Are you someone who's quick to lash out, to block, or you're like, well, that's just how I feel, so I just have to do it? And so when we fast as Christians, it actually really helps to reduce and overcome the power that your flesh is having over your emotions,
Mhm.
over your emotional impulses. So that's the role that all three of them play when it comes to your emotional wellness as a Christian.
Lovely. Thank you so much for that. I definitely love that answer. I wanted to ask a few more questions for us to kind of apply the emotional wellness tips that we've been talking about. So I have a few dilemmas for you. A woman finds herself lashing out in anger over small issues, not realizing it's actually years of unprocessed hurt from her childhood bubbling up. What should she do?
Yeah, that's a really good one. And that's honestly one of my favorite to deal with in coaching sessions because, um, yeah. So, so kind of the same thing I said with like the first one in terms of knowing the specialist to go to. So in this kind of scenario, I would recommend that the person speak with someone who does inner child work.
Mm.
There is a branch of therapy with like just inner child work and inner child therapy that would be really helpful for people that have like childhood wounds that are unprocessed and things like that. Um, Another thing that I would do with the person is figure out with the person the earliest memory that they have concerning that emotion. So, for example, maybe like, which also would be connected to a trigger, right? Like maybe the person, there's a moment that happens, a really tiny feeling, and the person lashes out. So I would try to get the person to understand that the reason why they've lashed out is because they were triggered by something, right? Lashing out, even if it's to a small thing, as we say, we know that the lashing out is not because of the small thing, but it's because of what the small thing represents or what the small thing reminds them of. So that is what we would call a trigger. And the unfortunate thing about triggers is that the reason why it's called a trigger is because it's just day to day, random, simple, small things that happen that trigger bigger things. So I would try to figure out with the person, what is the trigger? Like, okay. And I think I have an exercise in my book where I talk about this as well, like primary and secondary emotions. Most likely, the anger that they're expressing and lashing out is a secondary emotion to a deeper primary emotion they felt in their childhood that was never acknowledged, never processed, never validated, never understood. And so now they're covering up that bigger emotion, that primary emotion with the secondary feeling of anger. So I would try to work it all the way back to figure out like, okay, what is it about? Okay, this person, random thing like, okay, this person like stepped on your rug or whatever. Like I'm just using this person stepped on your rug and stained your rug and you blew up. Like what is it about, like that clearly was a trigger for you. So why was that a trigger for you? Now the person is like, I don't know. Like, I just feel like I keep telling people, stop stepping on my rug, and people just keep on like stepping on my rug. Like, no one is listening to me. Now they said something that is very important. Okay, no one is listening to you. So this is more than the rug. You don't feel heard. You don't feel like someone is listening to you. You just don't feel heard. Let's deal with that. When was the first time you didn't feel heard? Right. So it's very important to be able to track that back with the person to say, oh, okay, this is really about not feeling heard. When was the first time you can remember? It doesn't have to be when you were 5 years old, but the first one you remember that made a print like on your memory. Now you're working back with the person and now you're able to figure out like, okay, this is why you're lashing out because that wound from your childhood has still not been dealt with. So how can we do inner child work so that you can give yourself that solution or healing that you are looking for from your mom or from your dad or from your friend or from those people that didn't validate your emotions? And a huge part of that will also mean forgiveness. I know that's not a word people like to hear, but believe it or not, and when it comes to emotional wellness, personal development, emotional growth, any of those things, a huge part of it is forgiveness. Like, you can't really move forward in life if you don't figure out a way to give yourself closure for certain things that happened and to forgive people that have hurt you. The forgiveness is not to invalidate your experiences or to justify any of the things that they did. The forgiveness is for you to be able to move forward and not let what happened to you dictate how you do your life with yourself and with the people around you. So that's more so what I would work through with the person, is to track it back to figure out, okay, what was the first memory you had? Because this is not about the rug. This is not about what they said. This is about something deeper that it's making you feel.
Thank you so much for sharing that. That is great advice. Um, yeah, that is phenomenal. Thank you. While you were talking, I was listening, definitely listening. I was also going through your book to find the chapter that I was talking about earlier, where you talked about the connection between physical health and emotional wellness, and the dilemmas that we talked about focused on trauma and stored emotion. And for trauma, you linked it to gut health, and for stored emotions, you linked it to back pain. I'm gonna put those references in the comments, but I just think that beyond just how it affects our mind and our daily life with thinking, it also affects ourselves physically. So it's very important that we're putting these wellness tips into practice, seeking the appropriate professionals that can help us work through things that we're going through in our mind. So our physical as well, our the rest of our body, rest of our organs don't also have to suffer from that. So thank you.
Yeah,
So I have two more questions for you.
sure.
My next question is, I guess it's kind of like the last question. What's one message you want every listener to know after this conversation is over? What is one thing you want them to take away?
If there's one thing I want the listeners to take away, it would be this. Your emotions are not your enemy. Regardless of how heavy or intense they might feel or how uncomfortable it feels, that's what I mean by, yes, there aren't good or bad emotions, but there are uncomfortable ones and there are intense ones, but they're not your enemy. Think of your emotions more like data, literally. Think of them like data. They're trying to tell you something. So you have to collect the data and figure out the information that is being shared. Your emotions are always, they're like your inner signals to how you are responding and taking in your external experiences. That's literally what is going on. And so, for example, think of anger. Like when we think of anger, it just sounds bad. Like, oh, anger is like bad. But how many of us know that the Bible literally talks about righteous anger, the anger that you're supposed to feel towards injustice, right? Or towards betrayal. And so, anger sometimes can point towards an injustice that has been done. It doesn't even have to be a big one, it could be a really tiny one, like something that is unjust or unfair, or a boundary that has been crossed. That can also trigger that feeling of anger. So, how different would life be if we didn't see our emotions as they're the ones we need to aim towards and they're the ones we need to avoid and just like get rid of? Like, if you feel this, you need to just find a way to not feel it anymore. Like, no, they're not our enemy. They're literally trying to tell you something. Like, God gave us those emotions to help you navigate life and navigate your relationships. So if you're feeling anger, I would recommend just pause for a second. Like, whoa, where am I even feeling it? Let's even start there. Like, geez, it feels like there's an anvil stuck in my throat.
Mm,
Like, it feels like I can't, like, why are my eyes hot, stinging with like unshed tears? Like,
yeah.
let's pause and process it. What is the injustice that I'm feeling? What is the boundary that has been crossed? So sadness, for example, it's signaling that there's some sort of loss or something. Maybe loss of what you hoped would happen, loss of like whatever it is. Same thing with disappointment. Disappointment is actually a signal that there's an expectation that wasn't met. So if you don't get a job, you're going to feel disappointed, right? What is that emotion trying to tell you, and how can you process that better? So that's one advice I'll just give people. Like, just don't see the emotions as like good, bad, horrible. I don't ever want to feel this, but just more so like, all right, this is data. Let me collect this data and then let me process it and figure out, what it's trying to tell me.
Thank you for sharing that. It's actually so funny that that was the one you gave, because that's actually something that I learned from your book, and I actually applied that in my life now. Like, it's so funny that you said that, because I think That's something I started doing about a month, maybe 6 weeks ago after your book launch. Using emotions more as like a compass to kind of really sit with myself to think about where it's coming from, what I'm feeling. And I think also in a world that's so busy, one that's so busy, two very overstimulating, you don't know where. Sometimes it's hard to pinpoint or to catch where something is coming from. Like, let's say you're scrolling on TikTok and you watch 20 videos and then you end up feeling really sad. It's like, where is this coming from? Which video was it? Was it something I did before that? There's just so much happening in the world that it's very hard to pause and think, where's this coming from? So I love that you said like using it as a compass to kind of also using it as a compass and then also that name it to frame it, and just they go really well together to kind of catch and be more aware of what's going on in your mind. So that was great.
Yes. Can I add one more thing actually? It's one more thing that just came to my mind because yeah, that's, after I lost my dad, um there would be periods that would come, like random periods where I would just find myself just really irritated on that day. Like a day would come and I would just be irritated on that day and frustrated, and I'll just find myself fighting with people I care about or just not being in a good mood that day. And believe it or not, every single time that day would come, and it would be rare, like random rare. Every time that day would come, I'll look at my calendar, and lo and behold, it's the anniversary of my father's passing. And I didn't even realize that it was the anniversary. The anniversary would come August 19th or August 16th. At this point, it's been like almost 5 years, but the anniversary would come and then I would be like, oh, dang. Okay, so I'm not pissed at my husband. I'm just grieving. Like I'm grieving my dad's death. Like it's
Yeah,
literally that simple
yeah.
because you think you have forgotten, but your body has not forgotten. Your body has not forgotten the breath you held in that day when it happened, when you got that news. Your body has not forgotten like how you screamed and what literally went into your mind and got stored up on that particular day. So yeah, just again, like adding to what you said, like it's just so important to just pause and just like process it. And now, what I do now in this stage of my life, which has really helped me in my grief, is rather than the day of his passing being a day of just crying and grieving, what I do every year when that day comes is I do something that reminds me of him because I already know what's going to happen on that day. I'm going to be sad. I'm going to be really, heartbroken. And so, why not just change the thought patterns of that day to be an anniversary of remembering him? And like, okay, dad likes to take walks, let's take a walk today and just do it in honor of his memory. So that's just an example to say that even the really tough emotions, like God has designed things in such a way that there is a way that you can regulate those feelings for yourself. And I just want to say that to the listeners, whatever those heavy feelings are, you will be okay. You will be okay. It will take time. Your body is still trying to adjust to the new normal because your body is remembering certain emotions on certain days as they come. But you can change that thought pattern. You can change how you process that day and what you do on that day.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Ekemini. Thank you so much. Wow, I'm speechless. Thank you. My last question was just where people can find you. I realized in the midst of all my introduction, I actually forgot to say that you were the founder and the host of the Yellow Podcast, which is like, why did I forget that? But yes, Akemi is also has her own podcast, her own organization as well. In addition to being an author, perfume connoisseur, so many things. She too also has her own podcast slash video formats on her own streaming on YouTube, on Spotify. Are you on Apple Music as well? Apple
Yeah.
podcast.
Mhm.
But I wanted to ask, like, where can people find you? What are you working on that you're comfortable sharing with? What resources are available for people to get in contact with you? Your coaching services, like what's going
Mhm. Yeah. So you can find me, like Norma said, I host the Yellow Podcast and it is on the major podcast streaming platforms. So you can find the Yellow Podcast on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Um, and on my podcast, I dive deeper just into some of the things we're talking about when it comes to our emotions. There's also a huge faith aspect when it comes to my podcast. So you can check that out. You can purchase my book, Emotions in His Image, on Amazon, on Barnes and Noble. Yeah. So yeah, you can purchase it on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and like other book sites, I guess. After I published a book, I found out there are a bunch of them. There's like Books a Million, there's like Bookathon at this point, but but Barnes and Noble and Amazon is good enough. You can follow me on Instagram at KEMXVI or at the Yellow Podcast. And then in regards to my coaching, honestly, I'm still working on having an actual like website or platform where people can actually like easily book those sessions. So I don't have that yet, but it doesn't mean that I'm not taking clients. It's just more so clients that I've already built a relationship with. But if you're interested in coaching, feel free to DM me. Literally just DM me, I need coaching, or just DM me the word coaching, and I will send you the next steps that you need to take. um and so what I'm working on currently is season 4 of the Yellow Podcast, which will be out in September.
Hey,
You're meant to be, your platform is the first platform that I'm saying that on. September.
exclusive, exclusive. Hey.
Yes, so just get ready. It's going to be amazing. I'm having some very amazing guests, and we're going to be talking about all the things. So yeah, I look forward to just connecting with your audience as well, and just, yeah.
So exciting. So excited to see everything that's coming out. So excited to continue reading your book and to have others like read it and just learn more about emotional wellness, EQ. We all need to be smarter in the emotional wellness space. We could all do a little bit more with your emotional wellness as it aligns to our physical as it aligns to our physical health as well too. So thank you so much, Ekemini, for being here. Thank you so much everyone for tuning into this episode of Health Corner slash the meant to be. I hope you've learned something. And I'll put the link to Ekemini's book in the comments. Also, resources and research that relate emotional wellness to physical health, so you can also see the full scope of how everything ties together. But I think that's it for me. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye.